So today I'm gonna do something a little bit crazy. I'm gonna make a pizza in the microwave. And I'm not talking about reheating a frozen pizza. I mean making an entire pizza from scratch and baking it in the microwave. Now, you might be wondering why. Why would anyone wanna do this? And there are a few reasons. Number one, some people may not have access to an oven, but they do have access to a microwave. So this will give them a way to make pizza at home. Number two, microwaves are a lot more energy efficient than ovens. So if it actually works, it could be a good way to save money on your monthly energy bill. But number three, and probably the most important, I mean, I just thought it'd be funny. I mean, come on, pizza in a microwave. But I'm also really curious if it'll actually work. And I think the biggest issue I'm gonna have here is getting this dough to crisp up in the microwave. And the thing that should play the biggest part in that is the hydration level. So I'm starting out by making two basic doughs. One at a hydration level of 60%, meaning 60 grams of water per 100 grams of flour, and one at a hydration level of 75%. Now, otherwise, I'm just using basic all-purpose flour, along with instant yeast at a baker's percentage of 1%, salt at a baker's percentage of 2.5%, and olive oil at a baker's percentage of 3%. So after mixing until everything is fully incorporated, I'll knead the dough for about 5 minutes until it's nice and smooth. The higher hydration dough was a bit too sticky to knead on the counter, so instead I just performed a few sets of stretch and folds over the next hour or so. At which point the doughs had both about doubled in size, so I divided them and balled them up. And then I threw them into the fridge for an overnight fermentation. And when I brought them out the next day, the doughs were nice and poofed up, about doubled in size again, and they were ready to bake. Well, bake. You know what I mean. So I'm gonna use these plates as my baking vessel just because they're relatively flat, microwave safe. And I'm gonna shape the dough same way I normally would. A little bit of flour, top them with my typical New York style sauce, followed by some grated low moisture mozzarella. I'll leave the recipe for this linked below. We're ready to go. So this is where I keep my microwave. Now, honestly, I have no clue how long this is gonna need to bake for, but I did find a microwave bread recipe online from thefoodnetwork.com. And in that recipe, the entire loaf of bread baked in just 4 minutes. So I'm assuming it's gonna be pretty quick. Start with the 60%. So I kept an eye on the pizza as it went around and around, and after about 4 minutes, it seemed to be done. So in went my other pizza, same process, round and around, until after about that same 4 minutes, it looked to be done. Actually doesn't look nearly as bad as I thought it would. I mean, obviously we've got almost no color on it, but kind of what I expected. The dough seems actually pretty much cooked through. The cheese is nicely melted. Maybe I could have baked these a little bit longer. I left them in for about 4 minutes, but we won't know for sure until we give them a try. So it looks like I did get a little bit of crispness here. That's interesting. I don't know how it's not stuck to the plate. It's one thing I was kind of worried about. Yummy. The one thing I noticed, it's kind of smell like Kraft mac and cheese. It very much smells like that. I don't know what it is. Now the crumb structure, interesting. Like the crust didn't really rise very much. Again, I don't know the science behind that. It's not even a huge difference between the 60 and the 75% in terms of the rise or just the visuals in general. The main difference I noticed is when I pick them up, kind of as expected, the 60% has a little more structure, whereas the 75% is pretty floppy. Both of them on the bottom, you know, you can kind of tell they almost just steamed from the bottom. Visually, it kind of looks like a bagel after you boil it, or like a half-baked loaf of bread after you steam it. You know, that indicates that it kind of just steamed itself from the bottom. But not exactly looking forward to this, but let's give it a try. I mean, it's not awful. Flavor-wise, it tastes kind of like it would if it were baked in the oven, at least in terms of the cheese and the sauce. The crust is really the only difference I'm seeing, but it's a pretty major difference. It's just super soft and mushy. It does seem cooked all the way through, but we just got no crispness at all, and none of that usual nice flavor we get from the browning and charring on the crust. Got the 75% structural test. Little bit of tip sag, nothing too crazy. Not good at all. Pretty bad. Very rubbery. So definitely, if you are to bake a pizza in the microwave, you want to go with the lower hydration. I'll probably see how low I can push it, because while I wouldn't choose to eat this, I suppose if I were starving and I had to find something to eat and somehow this was an option for me, I guess I would eat it. But anyways, it's still not where I want it to be. However, I think I found something the other day during my research for this video that might help us out. So this is a microwave crisper pan. Just like it sounds, it's supposed to help foods crisp up in the microwave. According to the instructions instructions, all you need to do is preheat the pan in the microwave for about a minute or two, then toss your food in. In this case, I'm building my pizza on it, and then microwave it as usual. And I was pretty surprised with what I found when I took it out. All right, bone apple teeth. This one looks maybe a little bit better than the other one, but the true moment of truth is gonna be when we take a look at the bottom. I also added olive oil on top and around the edges on one half of this pizza just to see what kind of difference that would make. Again, I don't even know if olive oil does anything in a microwave, but I figured it was worth a try. I also noticed this pan cooled down pretty quickly. By the time I got the pizza built, it was down to like 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which meant that the preheating period didn't really do too much overall. But let's see what we're working with. And wet as ever. And the olive oil, also wet. That was a waste of $17. Actually, the olive oil side seems even worse than the regular side. Like I said, it kind of just absorbed into the bread. I do think I realized why it smells like Kraft mac and cheese though. I think it's just because, I mean, pasta is basically like wet bread, and that's what this is too. It's just bread that's wet, doesn't really have any browning or color on it. I don't want to judge it too soon. I mean, we still got to give it a try. Maybe the texture is a little bit better. Olive oil slice, a pretty decent cheese pull there. I mean, again, the side without the olive oil, just the plain 60% dough. It is edible, but it's not overly chewy. It doesn't have a super weird flavor or anything. It's just a little bit soggy. I mean, it just doesn't have that nice, rustic, bready flavor that we typically imagine. Again, it tastes more just like a cooked pasta noodle with cheese on top. I will say, if you threw this thing in the oven for a little bit on a baking steel, it probably would turn it into a pretty decent pizza. But that defeats the whole purpose of this video. I mean, if you're gonna go and preheat your oven, you might as well just bake the whole pizza in the oven. With that said though, I'm not ready to give up quite yet. I mean, this is only my first attempt with very little research, so I don't want to say that you can't bake a good pizza in the microwave. The main things I need to figure out is, number one, a way to give this thing a little bit more structure and, if possible, some crispness. And number two, if it's even possible, to get any browning on this. In order to do that though, I think I'm gonna have to do something that I was hoping I wouldn't have to. I need to figure out how a microwave works. How do microwaves work?
This is a food heating radio box. It uses radio waves to heat food. The radio waves heat the water inside food by pushing the tiny pieces water is made of. As the pieces move faster, they get hotter, which makes the food warmer.
Okay, so I think we all know that it uses microwave radiation. That wasn't the part I was confused about. The part that I was very interested in was what's actually happening inside the food. And basically what it does is it causes the water molecules in whatever food that you're microwaving to start moving around, which heats them up. So really it's kind of heating the food from the inside out, as opposed to most other heating devices like an oven that heat it from the top or bottom, or just in general from the outsides, which makes it very difficult because, I mean, water can only reach a maximum temperature of 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius, which probably explains why we weren't able to brown the food at all, because in order for those Maillard browning reactions to occur, you need to be at like 300 or 400 degrees.
Now the most interesting question. Why is heating with a microwave oven superior to conventional heating methods? Since microwaves can penetrate the food is cooked from the inside.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before, so I guess I was right. It kind of cooks from the inside as opposed to the outside, which obviously has its advantages, like he was saying, in terms of heating quickly, but it obviously has its disadvantages as well in terms of not getting that same level of heat directly on the surface.
The convection method cooks food from the outside in as opposed to the inside out, but this method can be useful on some occasions. When you need food with a crisp surface and a soft interior or baking, the convection heating method is preferred.
Okay, very interesting. So it does seem like if we want a crisp surface, a microwave may not be able to do that. I think there's gotta be a way, but maybe not. Maybe there's not a way. Well, I guess I could just look it up. Is it possible to brown food in the microwave? For browning and caramelization to occur, the food surface has to become very hot, 300 degrees Fahrenheit, like I said. Okay, since the air around the food stays cool in a microwave, the surface doesn't brown. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, really what you need in order for food to brown is to have that heat coming from the exterior. It does say there are a few exceptions, however. Sugar can be caramelized, and nuts and coconut toasted in a microwave. Sugar can be caramelized. I don't want to get my hopes too high, but I did think of one more idea. Before I test that out though, I want to do another experiment. Let's make some more pizza dough. So for this experiment, I'm making dough the same way I did before, but this time I'm using a hydration of 55%. Basically, I want to get back to my question from earlier of whether the water in the dough actually evaporates in the microwave. Because of course that would help to contribute to a little bit more rigid structure. And it should be pretty easy to test. What I'm doing here is just making a dough, stretching it out the same way I normally would, but this time I'm not gonna top it. Instead, I'm just gonna weigh the raw dough and bake it in the microwave for 4 minutes and weigh it again. And if it's lighter than it was before, that should be because some of the water evaporated off. All right, so it weighed 195 grams before baking. Let's see what we're working with after. Okay, so we're at 143 grams. So it did lose quite a bit of water due to evaporation. And actually I can kind of tell from the top, probably partially because I'm using a 55% hydration dough instead of 60, but it does have like a decent sort of crisper structure to it. Obviously still no browning, but it did harden up just a little bit. It might be a little too hard. Other than the lack of browning, it looks like a pretty solid base for a pizza. Let's bite into it and see what we're working with. Ew. So it is not a good base for a pizza. I don't know what exactly happened here. Maybe we ended up going too low in the hydration. Maybe I microwaved it for too long as well, but it's very hard and I don't even know if chewy is the right word to describe it. Like it's almost impossible to chew through. Definitely not what I would call a desirable texture. I think maybe with cheese and sauce on top, it would help it to stay a little bit moister, but I guess that's what we'll find out during our next test because I also have a few more ideas that are hopefully gonna make this pizza a little bit more edible. And here's my first test. So what I did here was instead of putting olive oil in the pan, I used butter. Reason being, I was just kind of thinking, and whenever I heat butter in the microwave, it kind of sputters and goes crazy. I thought maybe the reason the oil didn't work is because there wasn't any water in it. And as I learned, the microwave seems to require water in order for things to be heated. Crust though, nah, really didn't do any better than the olive oil. Maybe it'd have a little bit better flavor, but definitely not the result I was hoping for. I do have another idea though. So here I've got my final 3 pizzas. Now this one here actually looks pretty good. Reason being though, I baked this one in my oven. So I kind of cheated here, but this is really just meant to be a control to see what we're working against. This one as well doesn't look bad, but I also cheated because what I did here was I par baked it in the microwave the same way I have been throughout this whole video. And then I just finished it off in the oven to kind of crisp it up. And you can see that on the bottom, it worked pretty well. Top doesn't look bad. Maybe the cheese is a little bit overcooked, but I'm just kind of curious to see what sort of texture that produces. Now this last one was the only true entirely in the microwave baked pizza. And what I did here, my final attempt that I could think of to try to get some extra browning on this was I sprinkled a little bit of granulated sugar into the pan before it went in the microwave. And then I sprinkled some granulated sugar on top as well. Now we can already see on top, it really didn't seem to do anything, but this pan does feel super hot, way hotter than it's been with any of the other pizzas I baked. So I'm curious if it did do anything on the bottom. But before we find out about that, let's try our control here. Again, this is a 55% hydration, so much lower than what I typically go with. But otherwise, I mean, this is a pretty normal pizza. A little bit on the thicker crust side. Maybe I didn't stretch it out as much as I should have. Yeah, I mean, really solid. Definitely not the best dough I've ever made. I mean, it's basically like a same day dough. I did let it rest overnight, but I made it late last night, and right now it's the morning, so it hasn't even been probably been like 12 hours. Definitely a solid pizza though, kind of your standard New York style. I'm really curious to see what difference it makes par baking it in the microwave first and then throwing it in the oven. Just visually and kind of what I've seen throughout this entire video, the microwave does kind of limit the rise of the pizza, so we end up with a little bit of a flatter crust on this one. Let's see how it tastes. That's honestly not bad at all. I mean, I might even like it better than this first one. I probably could bake it for a little bit less time in the microwave just to prevent this cheese from over browning. But if you want a kind of tighter crumb, you know, New York style pizza, what I would say is this probably makes sense if maybe you have like a microwave and a toaster oven. And so the toaster can't properly bake a pizza because it can't get hot enough. So maybe you par bake it in the microwave first, throw it in the toaster oven, and you're using pretty minimal electricity with that method. And you can produce a pretty good pizza. But now, the moment we've all been waiting for, my sugar pizza. I tried not to add too much so it didn't end up sweet, but none of that's even gonna matter if we didn't get the browning that we were looking for. And we didn't. So I think it's pretty safe to say you really can't make a good pizza using only a microwave. It needs to have some sort of dry heat to get that browning and crispness on the exterior. Again, if you're trying to save energy, maybe you could par bake in the microwave, but you're still gonna need to finish it off in some type of oven if you wanna achieve any type of a decent result. But if that's not a concern for you and you just wanna make the ultimate New York style pizza, you can check out this video right here. I did a ton of research on it, and a lot of people have said it's some of the best pizza they've ever made. So either way, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.